Okay, so next let's welcome Professor Angjoo Kanazawa. Angjoo is an assistant professor at UC Berkeley, and she is also one of the organizers of this workshop today. Angjoo is also a research scientist at Google Research and serves on the advisory board of Wonder Dynamics. And I think she also have many cool projects related to like human body estimation from images or videos. Yeah. And also recently, I know that Angjoo is also working on some like novel view synthesis stuff. Yeah, pretty interesting. Yeah, hi, welcome. And
thank you so much for the nice introduction, and thank you for inviting me to this talk. All right, so today I would like to talk about perceiving 3D human interaction in the wild. And given that this workshop is about vision, graphics, and robotics, I think it would be interesting to talk about how humans interact with the world. And so a lot of my, do you see my screen by the way?
Yes.
Okay, all right, great. So a lot of my work in my lab starts from this assumption that we live in a world that is 3D and dynamic, with full of people interacting with each other and the environment. And so when it comes to understanding humans and objects, as we approach a society where these intelligent systems are more integrated into our daily lives, I think it's really important that these approaches can perceive, interpret, and interact with humans and the environment in the 3D world, because that's what we do. Now, today's commercial solution for non-rigid 3D is that of motion capture, which you require people to wear these suits, and you have to put them in a lab. But the world is so much more than a green screen. And so much of my research revolves around this goal of 3D perception from images in the wild. So we want to do this from internet images. And so this has been a lot of my focus, where we reconstruct 3D human bodies from these single images of sports or more everyday photos like Coco, more recently on video. I also work on reconstructing animals, because animals are also quite an interesting topic. And I also want to say that there's this first CV for animals workshop that we are conducting. And there's a lot of really cool problems in animals that's related to science. So I hope you will come. You can learn more about that there. And all of these things have a lot of applications in graphics. Obviously, you can print them and have a lot of fun printing I highly recommend, if you're in this 3D world, to print your results. So these are really great applications for content creation and making cool videos or cool effects like VFX. But also for robotics, these ability to perceive people is really key for anticipating human behaviors for autonomous vehicles when you want to predict what's going to happen in the future. And another really interesting topic is that of learning to act from visual observation, like this baby is demonstrating for us. So we took inspiration from this video, and so we had this work where from reconstruction of the human from video, you can learn to perform skills like cartwheel from watching YouTube videos. And these are not just playing the animation, but you can imitate them, or it's a policy, so you can interact with them, which we can do by throwing boxes. So there's been a lot of progress in 3D human mesh recovery. And then, so the more we do this, the more we're starting to feel that, you know what? We're making a lot of good progress in perceiving humans, but the world is really not just about humans. Humans are constantly interacting with the environment, and we really would like to understand them in the context of what's happening around them, including the objects and in the scene. And so this is what I want to talk about. The world is not just humans. We want to, people interact with objects, each other, manipulate objects. And so how can we do this? How can we perceive this? So this is why today I want to talk about human mesh recovery towards understanding human interaction. And then I will talk about two works. One is that recovers the 3D hands and the objects from in the wild images. And on the other hand, I'm going to talk about the data source for rich human behaviors, and that is movies. Movies are treasure troves of human behaviors, and how can we recover 3D human bodies in these environments, in these settings? So these are the two things I'd like to talk about today. Okay, so let's dive right in. And the first one is about human human hands and objects. And this work builds upon our prior work that tried to reconstruct humans and objects in the wild in like images like Coco, where people were interacting with these bicycles and benches. And I'm going to talk about this work in detail tomorrow at Simple Made Simple tutorial. And I just want to focus on the hand, because the reason why hands are really exciting is because people manipulate objects with the hands, and this is a really good data source for those you people doing robots, so that we can watch YouTube videos and learn how to manipulate these objects. Now, so because of this, there's a lot of interest in this topic, but existing hand object data sets that are 3D, have 3D annotations, are mostly in the lab because it's very challenging to recover, obtain ground truth 3D CAD models or 3D hands in the wild. Therefore, our really focus in this work was to make it work in the wild. And how can we have a method? And then we also propose a small but really rich data set that goes towards this approach. Okay, so in general, in the wild, there are no ground truth data. So what are we going to do? So the general strategy is to embrace the CAD models so that we don't have to solve the difficult problem of object shape reconstruction, which I think still requires, would be great to have them, but we can bypass that with CAD models and then leverage 2D image cues such as 2D key point detection, silhouette prediction, semantic segmentations, and then some motion capture data that gives you priors on how hands interact with objects. Okay, so our approach follows several steps, and it's an optimization-based approach because there's no training data of hands and objects in the wild. We first start with this optimization. So what we first do is we predict a hand pose estimation, and we do this in a simplified style by fitting these hand models to 2D key points from using some initialization from existing off-the-shelf approaches. Next, we want to get the object pose estimation. And for this path, we find out that actually just optimizing the 3D pose of the object after you do differentiable rendering actually works really well. So what happens is that we assume that we know what the best CAD models are, although we could search for the best one. And the idea is to randomly initialize the CAD models in the scene near the semantic segmentation, and then optimize for their 6DOF pose. And then also the scaling factor, and then obtain their initial estimates. And this works reasonably well as long as the masks are good and gets us started, although there are challenging cases. And then we do a joint optimization. I'll show a picture that will give you a better insight that prevents interpenetration, moving objects and hands closer together, taking a lot of inspiration from the human to human, multiple human reconstruction literature. And then you also want to preserve this ordering on the semantic segmentation, the depth ordering. Okay, and finally, for hand specific, inspired by GrabNet, we refine the final prediction through a network, which is trained on motion capture data. But at this point, this is a prior to refine the final fits. So here are some of the intermediate approaches of this optimization. So first, we have these individual optimizations, so initialization of the objects in the hands. And then you can do joint optimization that pulls them together, wants to minimize the key points and the semantic segmentation lost together with the interpenetration and depth ordering. And then finally, we can use this prior network, which adds a good amount of realism in their interaction. So here are some qualitative results. We took data set from 100 Days of Hands and Epic Kitchen, which are both excellent 2D data sets with really interesting hands-object interactions. Here are some results. And what we did was we used this method as it's an optimization method. It has a lot of knobs, which means it's in a way it's actually good for humans to intervene and improve the reconstruction. So what we did was that we constructed a new data set using our method and human intervention. And so what we did was on 500 or so images of 100 Days of Hands and Epic Kitchen, we first identified which are the right CAD models. And this is really like one of the more challenging, time-consuming part. But we collected, we have 191 object categories of these CAD models, which is a lot. And this is the long tail distribution. You can see that it's very long tail. And we use humans to figure out what are the best CAD models that are corresponding to these. And then we use our models along with significant human intervention to get one of these pseudo-ground truths or high-quality 3D reconstructions. On the right, we are showing these. And in comparison to prior approaches, our approach works on in the wild images. The data is only image. We have a wide variety of participants because there's no, this is all in the lab. Oh no, I think the video is a little bit stuck, unfortunately. But this keeps on going for a while. Let's see. Yeah, we can watch this video for a very long time. Okay, and one interesting thing that we can do from this is to kind of analyze the hand pose relationships in these image collections. Okay, and so this is an isomap embedding of hand poses using only the hand pose, not the object hand. And we can see very interesting properties of this data, which is that we have same object category and similar hand poses obviously cluster. But our data also incorporates similar hand poses but different object categories, interactions, but they all have similar hand poses. We have same object categories, pens, but very different hand poses and wide variety of grasp closure. And then we see that the x-axis corresponds to the grasping. You can see from opened to closed. Okay, so in summary, we propose this RHOI method for reconstructing hands and objects from single images in the wild. And then we use this technique in conjunction with human intervention to create this 3D new data set in the wild that we call MAO, manipulating objects in the wild. And the data set is going to be out in a month or so. Okay, so that is humans and objects, and more like hands and objects. Next, I want to talk about other kinds of interactions, which really depends on the data. And I think the other frontier, one interesting frontier is manipulation. But the other one is really that of long-range human behaviors that you can see in specific data sets like movies. So this is a really nice clip from Goodfellas. Movies are really a treasure trove of human behaviors because it's a storytelling mechanism. A lot of things are happening. People are able to understand this. And computer vision algorithms don't have or be limited in its ability to understand what's going on in the image. I'm not so sure how well you can see this, but this particular clip, these characters are going down this restaurant or behind this theater. You can see people interacting with each other. A lot of common sense knowledge is in here. And so if we can reconstruct people in this and even the objects, it would really lead to good data to learn a lot about how people interact with each other. Okay, now this is a really special clip in that it's very famous because the entire set is shot in one go and there's no shot changes. So compare this to current benchmark of the 3D human poses, it's more closer to performance capture. Like you get to see most of the bodies of the people. But the challenge is that in movies, what you really get is that there's a lot of shot changes. And movie makers use these shot changes to emphasize certain aspects of the scene. You zoom into his face, you will see this from a different shot. There's this constantly shot change that's happening. And this is a really good illustrative device for storytelling. But for computer vision, it's very difficult because every single time a shot changes, current algorithms actually treat all of these as different sequences. The challenge is that shot changes often result in very different cameras. So it's very difficult to, for example, figure out that there are, their relationship between the two shots using structure for motion algorithms, because they're very different. But the idea in this work is that you can actually use humans to figure it out. So here's the idea. So look at this sequence from friends. There's a shot here. And then you change to this view, and then it keeps on going. Now, current approaches treat all of these two sequences as completely separate. So here are some results. If you just run, we can't handle these different shot changes. Human tracking also, first of all, doesn't really work, or trackers don't really work across shot changes. And then here are the results of the simplified. So on the shot above, where you can see most of the human bodies, it looks really good, reasonable. But when there's only the partial bodies are available, these approaches start to fail very quickly. Even the state-of-the-art models that are trained on these cropped images also have challenges when you run them independently. But the problem, the thing is that it's such a missed opportunity, because these shots often depict the same underlying scene. And once you realize this, then you can actually treat shot changes as multi-view signal instead of a problem. Specifically, from one scene, you can reconstruct it. But if you know that they're the same scene, then you can actually use it as a multi-view signal to connect these two scenes through the human reconstruction. Okay, and so really, the idea of this work is to embrace the multi-shot as a 3D signal, which allows you to recover a consistent 3D human bodies across these shot changes. That allows you to reliably recover 3D human bodies a lot more than existing methods. There's a lot more way to go, but a lot more reliable than existing methods, because it is reasoning about multiple shots. Okay, so the idea is method-wise, it's very simple. It builds upon the simplify work, which is an optimization-based approach. So the first idea is to fit the simple model independently into each of these frames using 2D key point reprojection loss as usual. But using re-ID, we identify which shots correspond to the same individual. Then we can treat them as multi-view signal, and then try to fit the encourage 3D consistency across these two shots. And because the shots are different, the camera changes a lot. And so you don't want to enforce the consistency in the camera frame, but you want to do this in the canonical frame, free of the cameras. So then we are able to reconstruct and also obtain the cameras of these two really, really big wide baseline methods. And you can see that in these two shots, there are almost no overlapping aspects other than the human. And so if you use structure for motion or motion matching or something like this, or feature matching, you would not be able to recover that these are the same scenes. Okay, so that's really the method, and it allows you to reconstruct people, and we reconstructed people in the AVA data set, which contains movie data with a lot of interesting interactions. And here are some comparisons, again, to single frame prediction methods that fail a lot when there are only faces or like very partial occluded humans. Now, the nice thing about this is that once you do this, you can actually use this spin style and then use this as a multi-shot optimization as pseudo ground truths to training regressors or like human metric or HMR like one-shot methods. And so you can do this for single view methods or also for video. And we also introduced transformers for this for one specific reason, which I will get to. But so here are some results where you train HMR again with the AVA data, which is more consistent. And it shows that compared to previous approaches, it's a lot more robust because it's now trained on AVA and it has very good multi-shot 3D pseudo ground truths from the multi-view signal that comes from multiple shots. Okay, we tested this on AVA, but we also tested this on the partial humans data set. And here are some multiple views of these results. Okay, So another nice thing about, so when it comes to movies, another challenge is that there are such thing called B-rolls, you know. In conversation, for example, you might be looking at me and you gotta look at another character and then you gotta come back to me. And that means there's gonna be a lot of interweaving frames of other identities. And even if you know the identities, it's unclear how to deal with this in, for example, like RNNs or convolutional neural networks. Do you like zero out these like other people, or do you just like cut them? You just not include them. So the nice thing about transformers is that since they are attention-based, you can just, if they're not the same person, when there's a B-roll happening, you can simply just not attend to it. And it gives you a really, really nice way to handle these B-roll situations. And we think it's a reasonable, and then this is why we used it for movies. And so we trained, we also trained RNNs and convolents, but the transformers are more robust on this task. And so you can train a multi-frame transformer on this method. So this is very similar to Vive and HMMR, but like using a transformer. And here are some results. And compared to previous approaches that wasn't trained on multi-shot data, these approaches are really, you know, not robust to these partial humans and shot changes, which is going to happen soon. Yes. Okay. All right. Let me see, check the time. So we have a lot of data results, and you can see, yeah. You know, then there's still a lot of work to be involved, and especially recovering multiple humans in this setting would be an interesting next step. And reasoning about their locations, global location would be also important for understanding their long-range interactions. Okay, and so just as the, you know, sake of evaluation metrics, you know, you might say that this is improved because it's trained on AVA. We find that we can actually train on exactly on the same data set. We can train a CNN or an RNN, like HMMR or Vive. We trained on the AVA dataset, but we find that the transformer model is more stable and it can handle these B-roll cases using attention. Okay, so here are some results comparing the transformer model and the recurrent model and the convolutional models. And they're all trained on the similar data, so you see improvements on all of them, like you should, and you will just see, you know, these small differences, subtle differences that include jumps. Okay, so the takeaway is that shot changes, first of all, takeaway is that movies are a really rich data source, and it would be great to do 3D human analysis on them. But then the real biggest bottleneck was that these shot changes or close-up shots, which our current methods really struggle. But then the shot change is an opportunity for multi-VQ, actually. It's not a nuisance factor. And so this is really the key idea, and that enables us to perceive humans in movies. Another thing is that because of the human recognition, it allows us to do extremely wide baseline camera estimation, because HMR methods give you camera. And so these approaches are giving you these different cameras. And we don't really touch on that too much on this work, but I think it's exciting for future work, because now we are able to relate one shot to another. And it's kind of so silly that, like, you know, you look at movies of people, this started because we look at movies of people conversing with each other, and it's like current computer vision algorithms like can't even tell, or like that they're talking to each other, or like the relationship between them each other in 3D. And it seems so obvious to us, and it is kind of going in that direction. Okay, the multi-shot optimization gives you a lot more robust because it's multiple views, and it can be useful signal for regressive models. And this is a step towards longer range human behavior analysis in movies, not humans. So I want to end in for the overall view is that overall message that I have is that there's been a lot of progress in human misrecovery. I think, or just in 3D human pose estimation in general. And I think what it was that in pre-2016, a lot of the works were still in the lab because this is a really challenging problem. We really pushed the boundary. I'm not putting a lot of many works that are in this area. It's moving very quickly. And we are now able to analyze images like Coco. But even the images in Coco, a lot of the humans that we tend to focus are full body humans. And once you start wanting to really process YouTube videos or more edited media or TVs, you realize that, in a lot of storytelling, you don't always see the full body of the person. And so just like because of the shot changes. Okay, so I think really where we're going is from performance capture, which we're starting to be able to do, although still there's a lot of work to be done, to moving on to storytelling or understanding rich interaction between people. And one of those is in the realm of understanding people from movies and understanding how hands interact with objects that I talked about today. Okay, so that really concludes my talk, which I have like 5 minutes for questions. I want to thank my collaborators, Za and Ilya, for the hand project, and George, who's a postdoc with me and Jitendra at Berkeley. And I didn't really talk about papers that are happening in this CVPR. We have PixelNerf and 3D relighting, exciting relighting reconstruction methods and 3D key point detection methods. So hope to see you in my poster session. Sorry, I meant to write them here, but it's not here. Okay. Questions?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for your talk. Yeah, so I think there's a lot of questions raised in the chat box. And also, yeah, and Anna, but that he has raised his hand. So maybe Anna, you can ask a question.
Hi, Angjoo. Thanks for the great talk. The multi-shot optimization looks very cool. We were also trying something very similar, but for novel view synthesis. Like, have you thought about using this method to do novel view synthesis? But we ran into copyright issues with the movie, so we didn't know what are the legal challenges with that. So it's kind of in the bottleneck, but have you tried using this method for synthesizing novel views?
So, well, in a sense, I think that what's the difference between novel view synthesis and simplify is that one is doing on key points and one is doing on pixels. And I think it's actually an interesting idea. I think if we wanted to reconstruct avatars that are actually photorealistic, like, some like going towards the direction of like Paifu, for example, I think that would be a really cool data. I haven't really thought about it actually. So you could reconstruct these avatars and then supervise that from movies. We didn't really consider this because we're using simple, which doesn't really do appearances.
Yeah.
I think, well, there was one more question that you said about the copyright. Yes. And I think that's another challenge, especially if you're in industry, it's a specific challenge. And academia really, I think, prevents you a little bit from this. But I think you should look at AVA. AVA is explicitly using video. It has passed all of these licensing issues. And you know what? Another really interesting thing about AVA is that because of this particular licensing issues, the movies in there are not necessarily like Hollywood movies, but movies from all over the world. And so the diversity is really rich. And there's also really a lot of Nigerian movies. And I also think, so that diversity, I think, is really good and interesting analysis there also.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. And also, there's a lot of questions in the chat box. One from Yuanlu Xu, who is also our workshop co-organizers. He's asking, so he's had a very cool work on 3D human reconstruction of movies. So a question for this work, so would there be an implicit assumption that there is a fairly good view so that we could make accurate predictions? And would the method handle the person in most shots that are occluded? And also, would part-based methods work better in this scenario?
Yeah, I think so. Fairly good view, so we can make accurate predictions. I guess, you have to see some. Yeah, if the person is completely occluded or something, this is simplified based, so it relies on 2D key point predictions in different views. And so if you can't really see them, then that's not really possible. But like, yes, we assume that person and are somewhat visible. Some of the occlusion I think is possible. Like as long as you see some key points, then it's possible. So for example, this is why this friend scene is really difficult, because this is why the friend scene is really difficult, because look at this one. This Chandler is like only in the back, and therefore like open pose won't give you like faces and everything. And this is why there aren't that many 2D key points to kind of really guide you. These are the cases where it really works really well, or like it's very good for this. Part-based method, I think this is an interesting direction. Yeah, I haven't really considered this. Okay,
Yeah,
maybe I can go through the questions.
Yeah.
Let's see. You should try this approach in action movies where there are tons of cuts and poses are not necessarily normal. That's a really good question. Another interesting thing actually is that this is why I think long-range analysis is interesting. And this is why I'm saying performance capture and storytelling actually has very different problem settings, because performance capture, like actually a lot of things are happening. In storytelling, most of the kind of interaction is conversational or like, related to the story. So it's not necessarily, unless you're watching Jackie Chan, it's not necessarily action. And so I think what your question is asking is, would it help on action movies? And it might, because multi-view is really important for these difficult cases. But it actually becomes somewhat mid-tail or long-tail in the movies that we're looking at. I think that's at least I think. Yeah, but yes, the multi-view is always much better than single view. And so in that case, I think that the shot does help. Yeah, same with occlusion. Okay, so would you use the same approach for objects 3D pose estimation? It would be more challenging when object is rigid and other is flexible with motions. Yes, I think you're asking a really cool question, which is that now that you can see movies with a human, or maybe you can do multiple humans. I think there's another questions of this, and I think that's really a good direction. And then even human objects, you can do something like foci in these scenes, and I think that's definitely something we're looking into. There's a lot of interesting things that happens in these scenes where once you start assuming this, you actually have to model the camera independently from each person, because there are multiple people moving around multiple rigid objects. And then often in simplify or simple, like you pretend there is like one fixed camera and the human is moving, but actually we'd have to start modeling the camera and every single person oriented in the world, which is interesting, but it's also the right thing to do. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, okay, thank you. I think we're a bit out of time. Maybe
okay.
if you're free, you can also feel free to use the chat box to reply to this so many questions. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for coming, and it's really a nice talk. Yeah. And okay. So some interesting thing is that our next speaker, Tony Tong, he is also working on things related to human body reconstruction. Tony is currently a research scientist manager at Facebook Reality Lab, and his project includes the creation of next generation of virtual humans for AR/VR applications. And before joining Facebook, he was an